Steve, are you on?
I am. Hi there.
Are you Kermit right now?
Ribbit. Hello, Tom. That's a gorgeous shirt. Wow.
I thought I would make a statement.
You kind of match the drapes behind you too. It's really
Yeah,
well
you're so
coordinated.
coordinated.
I
Nice.
actually didn't really think about that, Sue Croft, but
I think that might be your color, you know, remember, have you had your colors done? Remember that?
I haven't had my colors done or my pronouns done. No, I'm all, this is the this is the shirt for the national meeting of the Boy Scouts in 2017 that was in Orlando, Florida.
I swear, everything you wear and everything you drink coffee out of comes from the Scouts.
Well, most. It's like
I happen
marching.
to think that gray is in.
Yeah, you look marvelous.
You can never go wrong. You can never have too much gray. Are we all ready for the 4th of July, Tom?
I think they are. Cheryl was doing great financially. The 375th committee donated $7,000 of our excess money
This is
to
weird.
the fireworks display. So
Steve's weird.
we should have a good fireworks display. Although I know it's kind of hard to believe that maybe fireworks went up in cost too, but
Yeah. Never mind the insurance you gotta buy.
well, the one and then I don't know what happened with the barge rental. We split the barge rental with West Beach, so that's, you know, they tow it to Manchester, and then the next day they come with a tug and tow it away from Manchester and tow it over to West Beach so they can have their display. So the cost is kind of split in half. Parade hopefully will be good. It looks like the weather is maybe questionable on Saturday, but good on Sunday and Monday.
Yeah.
I want it to be good on Saturday too, because that's the Rotary Red, White, and Blue breakfast. And
Yeah, undercover, but it'd be nice to have sunshine.
yeah, I remember last year they had one of the weather forecasters had something on this week showing like the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th last year, and the high temperature on one of those days was 48 or something like that. There was a picture in the cricket this last week of showing people at the Red, White, and Blue breakfast in sweatshirts and hoodies.
Mittens, yeah, right.
Yeah, the only thing they didn't have on were mittens and galoshes, I guess. But
Hey, it's New England, come on.
yeah, exactly. Let's get ready for it.
Well, Jessica, I'm sorry that Chris can't join us because he's got an even brighter shirt than Tom is wearing.
It's pretty close, yeah, pretty close there.
Yeah. No, he's more in the orange and less in the pink, but you know, we're not gonna split hairs here. My sister's always told me that it takes a very self-confident man to wear a pink shirt.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take this as being flamingo.
Mango, that's good.
Hi, Jess.
How are you, Tom?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
And you?
Hey, Peter.
Good evening.
How you doing?
Not bad, and you?
Oh, good. I saw you at the concert last night.
Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to some of the later songs of the Beatles, more on the Sgt. Pepper era, you know, that kind of stuff, but they kind of stayed with the early songs, which was fine, but.
You know what the amazing part is, that when you listen to them do the songs, they, in an hour, they can do like 15 songs, because the average Beatles song, when they first started to produce songs, were like 2 minutes and 20 seconds or 2 minutes and 32 seconds. So if a song got to 3 minutes, it was really very long.
When you realize they could actually do one album for the first half and still have what, 8 or 9 left?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have any idea how many top 10 hits the Beatles had? Not even counting Wings and Paul, John by himself and everything else.
Well, they have an album called Beatles One, which is all their songs that hit #1, and that has like 22 or 23 songs. So that, and that was just under the Beetle name. That wasn't. that
Chris
wasn't-
says 34. He looked it up.
Really? Okay. Oh. It was so weird because you've got the A side of a single and the B side of the single, and sometimes the A side would be number 1 and the B side of the single would be number 2.
Yeah, that happened with I Want to Hold Your Hand. Not that I was alive or can remember any of that.
Remembering is a problem for some of us.
Yeah, so raise your hand if you were at Shea Stadium when the Beatles performed.
I wasn't there, but I was at Suffolk Downs when they did.
And could you hear anything they said or sang or played?
Well, I don't know whether it was the sound system or me.
It was all the teenage girls screaming, just a constant white noise barrier to anything else.
Yeah, my sister, who was, I think, a freshman in high school at that time, went to Suffolk Downs.
Wow. Wow. All right, folks, I see that the crowd has gathered. This is wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the June 29th meeting of the Manchester Task Force on Water Resource Protection. This is guaranteed to be our last meeting in June of this year anyway. And we have a full agenda, which for the benefit of everybody, I will stick up on the screen here. If I can figure out how to do it. There we go. So we'll be hearing some updates, some status reports briefly from 3 groups. We will talk about meeting with the select board next week and having a task force meeting in July and look at the minutes. So let's proceed to updates. Unless, Sue, there's any announcements you'd like to make at this point.
I do not.
Okay. Well, I can deliver the update on Hamilton's road paving, which is that they're planning to proceed, and they believe they've cleared all the regulatory obstacles. Namely, they have gone back to their Conservation Commission last week to remedy a procedural error, a really large one they made, of letting the order of conditions expire and needing to reapply. But having done that, they had a debate of sorts of the risks to Manchester's water supply and the possibility of increased traffic and whatnot. They received the customary assurance from their DPW director that all was in good hand, and they voted unanimously to approve. This is unsettling to me because I was better prepared for this meeting than I was the previous one, and I spoke up on behalf of our water supply and myself. And I can report with some likelihood that there has been an appeal filed with DEP today by the abutters, the Hamilton residents, concerning, I guess it concerns only the section, that little section of the road that's closest to Gravelly Pond, because that was all that was in front of the Hamilton Concom on May 25th when they voted under the Wetlands Protection Act to approve. So that's a request for the Mass DEP to review the procedure and the substance of that order, and if appropriate, issue a superseding order. And if people are interested, I can see if I can obtain the text of the appeal. But I believe it's strongest point has to do with our water supply and the fact that the road sits in what's called Zone A, which, as most of you know, covers 400 feet from the bank of the pond and any stream that feeds into it. And that includes the whole section that's under discussion. And among the responsibilities in Zone A is not to pave anything. So while the Concom might not enforce that, it's possible the DEP would, or perhaps putting on their hat as in charge of drinking water standards. Ashley, your hand is up. What's up?
Manchester, either officially or any residents unofficially, also going to try to just speak up and oppose this?
Well, today is the last day, so it has passed the deadline for appealing the decision under the state law. There are 60 days from issuance of the order under the local bylaw, which is, to my knowledge, hasn't been issued yet, but was voted last Wednesday by the Hamilton Concom. But that appeal would have to be to Superior Court, and that's a more ambitious undertaking. So, we could certainly discuss it. But I guess I'd love to know if anyone knows whether the conversations between our select board and Hamilton Select Board have taken place and whether they've yielded any fruit on this subject. All right, well, we'll try to get some information. It was Becky Jake's intention to reach out to her counterpart in Hamilton, chair to chair, and talk about this. Other comments about that? Okay.
Well, I think we should do something about that. It seems like this would be a risk to our water supply, and I think we should act.
I have a question along these lines, Steve. Is the alternate route that was declined by us 9 months or so, or whenever it was, is that within 400 feet?
No,
That's outside the 400-foot level?
I believe it's entirely outside the 400 foot. Well, it may not be entirely, the edges of it may be in it, but it's certainly outside the wetlands jurisdiction. So the Concom didn't need to consider that stretch of road originally. Kind of depends on what, how you evaluate the stream that drains a little wetland to the east into Gravelly Pond. It's kind of the only visible surface stream that flows into Gravelly. And to my eye, which is not expert, it's a perennial, not an intermittent stream, and therefore qualifies to have a 200-foot Zone A around it, as well as the 400-foot around the pond. It also qualifies as riverfront, as you fans of the Wetlands Protection Act would know. Any other comments? Okay, who feels qualified to report on what the EPA is doing on PFAS? There was a significant press release announcement from EPA last week on this.
Randy,
I guess me, or
Go
I don't know
ahead.
if
Good.
Gordon, go ahead.
No, I'm not prepared to say anything tonight, but Randy had circulated it to our sub team, but go ahead, Chuck. Yeah.
Well, I guess from a water perspective, or our ability to treat water and put it in the distribution system, this has currently no bearing on our ability to do that. Like the DEP MCL is what governs. This is just a health advisory, as I'm understand it, for EPA, and it is likely a prelude to them taking a stand, because currently I think EPA limit is 70 for their level. So I would say that that's currently where we are. in terms of our regulatory responsibility. In my estimation, or from the literature I've read and the conversations I've had with people, this health advisory is somewhat fear mongering because nobody can test to this level. If I'm not mistaken, it's 4 parts per quadrillion, not even trillion.
Yeah.
So to put it in perspective, we're right now at an MCL of 20 parts per trillion. So that would be, orders of magnitude less 4 parts per quadrillion. So anyway, it's tough to kind of square that with, reality when as we've said, and, this task force knows very well, we don't have the ability to test at 20 parts per trillion, really, if we're being honest. The data that we're getting back from 2 separate labs that are supposedly certified in, conducting this test are not able to do that. So, or, not be able to repeat their own results. So anyway, that being said, I think the health advisory itself is for all exposure, and it's, I believe, I'm going to mess this up, but for the sake of discussion, I believe it's all your exposure, not just your drinking water exposure. And I believe that it takes into account sensitive subgroups that would be vulnerable to that level. So that's just to say, like, if you're a healthy person that, isn't breastfeeding or pregnant, that that your likely exposure and likelihood that you will get sick is much, much less than, if you were to be exposed to that. But as we know, in your general ordinary life, regardless of what you do with your drinking water, you are likely to be or come in contact with PFAS levels that are much, much, much higher than 4 parts per quadrillion. So it's very tough to say where we go from here, but that's kind of how I see this. I believe there will be a EPA action, in the coming months, probably in the fall, but might take longer.
Yeah, to elaborate on what Chuck was kind of alluding to there, it's only 20% of the health advisory is from water. The remaining 80% is from all other exposures to PFAS.
Yeah. Yes, I understood it. That's very helpful, Chuck. And I understood that they were essentially reporting epidemiological and lab results about the health dangers and trying to put an upper threshold on that. And when they did that, they came up with these infinitesimally small exposure levels, which is, as Chuck said, can't currently be measured. But my guess is they would put many public water systems into violation if they were made rules.
Well, it's my understanding that the ones that are banned have already been discontinued by manufacturers some time ago, and they are considering others which the manufacturers are in the process of discontinuing. So I don't know whether that means they're the most dangerous or whether it was just a matter of convenience on the government's, on EPA's part. Since there'll be no pushback, they're already discontinuing the use of them.
Ann, you had your hand up. Thank you. Can you unmute? You're muted, Ann.
Sorry, the cat was sitting on the mute button. Oh,
That's new.
could somebody give me some examples of consumer goods that are likely to include these chemicals?
Fast food packaging is a emerging.
Teflon pans.
Well, Teflon pans are banned, but so in favor
Okay,
of
but
other.
nobody has reclaimed them and recalled them.
No.
If these things are actually lethal, you would think. How about
Unfortunately, it's not generally how political processes work, as you know, as well as I do.
It just
We deal,
strikes me that we are going after a gnat when there is a forest. And I would resist the temptation to raise huge public hue and cry about our water supply, when in fact, everybody's household has got waterproof garments that are vastly more dangerous. And if we want to protect people from those, then we should tell them to figure out whether your pants are Teflon and throw them out. And if your outer garments have this, then get rid of them. That would be much more effective at protecting people from this than worrying about 4 parts per quadrillion in our water.
yes, so long as the EPA is wrong, which they may be. This may be a political gambit by them, but if they're right, then these are among the most toxic substances we've ever dealt with. And if that's the case, then we all should be alarmed. I'm not going to spread it as an alarm because I'm not sure. But that's the caveat about what you're saying.
But
Well,
there are so many more direct things that we can do than
Yeah.
worry about the tiny exposure in our water.
Right, but bearing in mind what you just said, which is if we throw out our Teflon pans and our Gore-Tex garments, we will be drinking water containing those PFAS within 50 years. I can virtually guarantee that. So it isn't a simple problem if the toxicity is that high. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, I'm trying to be a realist. Anyway, this is the slippery slope of contamination. Chuck, you want to save us from sliding down it?
Well, I just want to say from a practical standpoint, like there's no way we could treat to that level. We can't even test to that level, so we can't treat to it. And then I would just kind of say, beyond, just what Ann was saying, which is all true. And, part of the reason why a lot of water suppliers are pulling their hair out, but the FDA, which is, a sister agency to the EPA, doesn't have their own limit. They have not taken a stand on these types of things. So like you said, in fast food packaging and other, very common food packaging, and in the food itself, there's no requirement to even test the food as it, goes to market, goes to, be consumed by consumers. So it's totally, it's just never, it's not going to go away regardless of what you do. And to just single out water supply, and, not even from a practical standpoint of treating it, but like, I can't remember, somebody else might've said that, they're going to basically put a whole bunch of public water supplies across the country now in, violation of their own MCL that nobody can treat to. And therefore, how you can't square those types of things. And then another thing, I've heard some people, not on this group, but other calls that I've been on, advocating for bottled water. And it's like, well, bottled water is not held to that standard. They do not have to run those tests. And therefore, how can you trust bottled water? So it's like, literally, we would have to stop drinking water, which we all know is equally impossible. So it's just one of those things where you really could spin around forever. And so I guess that's my pitch to get off the slippery slope. But yeah, it's very not well thought out. And, there's certain things we can do, certain things we can't do. But for practical speaking, there's just no way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like looking for your keys where the light is good. We know that public water supplies already do treatment, and they supposedly have the resources, particularly with the infrastructure bill, quote unquote, so that would be a place logically to lean, but to your point, it's not a solution. The next update is about DEP's advice, I guess is the way to describe it, on wastewater treatment. And I guess I'd like Chuck to weigh in on this, and maybe Peter, and just leave it at that, because I think you have slightly different interpretations, maybe more than slightly, of what DEP has told the town.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start, you know, as
Thanks.
I think we've mentioned on this call, but if not, you know, the town is under a consent order on our wastewater system with DEP. We have a very active line of communication with them. You know, it's been on my list of things to do is to get the ACOP, I should say, is a consent order with DEP and EPA. So our permit to discharge wastewater, treated wastewater into the harbor is, you know, regulated by DEP and EPA. And eventually, almost 10 years ago now, the town was over its 80% threshold of their permitted effluent amount limit. And therefore, you know, DEP and EPA started asking questions, because if you go to 80% and you're not taking care of your system or your plant, or, you know, and there's other things you could be under consent order for, like, you know, not treating your treatment process to the level that it needs to before it discharges. There's all sorts of things. But in our particular case, it had to do with the excessive I&I, which was inundating our collection system, which was then, you know, making its way to the treatment plant. And the capacity of the treatment plant is, you know, is very fixed, and the amount that we are allowed to discharge is fixed. And because, you know, you can't really control how much I&I, the inflow and infiltration that's getting into your pipes, you know, if you start approaching your permit limit, you know, you had better have a plan to, you know, get that under control. Otherwise, you're going to be having combined or SSOs, which would be sewer overflows, because basically your pipes and your plant don't have the capacity to keep up and treat up, you know, up to the level that you're permitted at. So that's all, you know, been, you know, very much, you know, top of mind for the town for almost a decade now. We've made significant progress in fixing the I&I. You know, basically we line pipes and we line manholes and we line other things that are connected to the sewer system that, you know, are basically allowing groundwater or rainwater or any other, you know, non-wastewater flow. And so we've been in the process over the past year or so, probably even more, where we've been trying to get DEP to lift this consent order, because it's not good for any city or town or system to be under consent order. It's a lot of more money that you have to pay consultants. It's a lot more money that you have to pay lawyers. It's, you know, it's a thing. So we don't want to do it. We want to just do what we want to do because it's the right thing to do. And, you know, we have a permit and we need to live by that permit. So I have been writing several letters back and forth to DEP, asking them to lift the consent order, because we've hit basically all the milestones that were within, you know, our action plan. And I've finally gotten to a point now where DEP has said, yes, you have made a lot of progress with your collection system. However, and this is, you know, just because this has gone on almost a decade, there is now a regulation that you need to have a 5-year I&I plan to, you know, that's approved by DEP, you know, just as your general practice. Well, when we first started this exercise, and when we first, you know, we're across the, we made a 5-year I&I plan, but 5 years is up. We've already done it. We've done everything. So DEP doesn't want to lift the consent order until we have a new 5-year I&I plan. And so that's basically where we're at. Now, that letter that you know, I sent to a resident a week or so ago, that I guess made its rounds to, you know, some people, you know, Board of Health, Concom, otherwise, you know, I'll give that letter to anybody. It's not really state secrets, but essentially I said, can you please lift the consent order along with the moratorium? That was another aspect of the consent order. So the moratorium itself rolls up to the consent order, as does our CWMP, which is the Comprehensive Wastewater Management Plan, that, you know, is a living document that the town has updated, and that we actually, about a year ago, we updated a section of the CWMP for, you know, to basically satisfy DEP that we were, you know, ready to go, and I'll say, you know, walk on our own and not have to run everything by them, which is what the consent order is basically saying. So anyway, they responded with a letter back in December. That letter was essentially saying, and I'm paraphrasing, and if you read, you know, the DEP speak of the letter, you know, you might come to a different conclusion, but I can tell you what they're really saying in that letter is, you, Manchester, have done a lot of work. We agree that you've done a lot of work. You've done so much work that we will allow you to lift the moratorium, which means we can allow residents to connect to the sewer system, which was a condition of the ACOP, which and they, part of the process was we did the CDOMP. So this is more DEP speak that is in that letter, which is basically saying as long as you follow your CWMP, which includes an on-site wastewater management plan, that's part of the CWMP. As long as you do all of those things, you are free from the moratorium, and we will evaluate your 5-year II plan when you submit it, and then we will lift the consent order. That's essentially what that letter is saying. So if you go to the CWMP, which is on the website, there is certain aspects of it's like I said, it's a very comprehensive wastewater management plan for the entire town, which includes our collection system, but it also includes on-site wastewater systems, which are essentially septic systems. And if we do whatever we want to do as a town, if we want to extend the sewer system to Raymond Street, if we want to extend it to Smiths Point, if we want to spend it, these are all things that are in the CDOMP. One other thing that is not very popular right now, but was in the CDOMP from 6 years ago, is the limited commercial district, which has a set aside for allowing the sewer system to be connected. So that's, that can happen if the town, wants it to, or even if the town doesn't want it to, it is allowed to happen in DEP's eyes. So I guess that's where I'll stop talking, but, and there is the on-site management system, which would be to, if any homeowner wanted to do a septic system, or if they wanted to do septic, as was discussed on the LIP with the 40B with the selectmen, that the selectmen preferred that they do an on-site system for the 40B. So all of these things are basically allowed under the CDOMP, and it's up to the select board, which is the sewer commissioners, to approve it or not. And in the case of the 40B, it's not really up to the sewer commissioners. At this point, it's up to the ZBA. So I guess that's how I see it. I can tell you that's what that DEP letter means, and happy to take any questions on it.
Nice.
Well, I agree with everything, Chuck has said. There's been tremendous progress. And they lifted the moratorium. The last paragraph in that letter suggests that we follow the plan and show preference to, I don't want to say, to the existing septic systems that could be improved, Raymond Street, others that are on undersized lots. They did set aside for small commercial, a suggestion for small commercial. And then at the very end, it says the decision on how the existing reserve capacity is used is the decision of the Board of Health according to existing Title V regulations. That was the next to last sentence. There was a gentleman's name, I forgot who it was, what it is. And it says, if you want any questions or clarification, email only this name, which I've done, to ask him to clarify that last sentence.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Obviously, this doesn't directly impact drinking water, but I think as Ann Harrison has said a number of times, if we don't use particularly large consumers of drinking water to recharge existing aquifers, we run risks. It would be safer to find a safe way to use that on-site to recharge. Ron, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Chuck, where are we on this second 5-year II study? Are we hiring a consultant, or what's the status of that?
Yep. So couple of things. One is we're going back. There was, well, not even going back, but just in general, one of the first steps is that you meter the various points in the sewer system. So you break the sewer system up into sub areas, and then you meter those, And there's technical ways, Ron, you probably are aware of them actually, but for everybody else, like you can essentially, put these gauges in the collection system itself, and then you can actually watch as as rain comes and goes. We left them in for months. As you get rainstorms, whatever, you can basically see what the base flow is, and then you can see, oh, it rained here. We got 3 inches of rain, and now all of a sudden we're seeing the pipes at 80% full instead of 20% full, which is what they normally would have been. So to answer your question, what we did and where we're at is this spring, which is the best time to meter, rather than when we got that letter in December, rather than come up with a 5-year plan that really had no, I'll call it engineering basis. I said, why don't we just wait until we do our spring metering, which is something we're probably going to do anyway, and then see if that out of that, because we've done a ton of work. And even since the last time we metered before this past spring, we wanted to basically verify that the work that we had completed in the collection system, solved the issues that we were seeing previously. And now we're comparing that to, what we get now. And so essentially we had that data back from the metering subcontractor. We do have a consultant that is, basically running the numbers, and, it's a bunch of different Excel exercises basically. And then we will, take that information and decide what our 5-year plan should be. Should we go to this street? Should we go to that street? Where are the areas that basically we're seeing inundation after rainstorms, and we will fix those. So we don't have that finalized. I don't even have a draft in front of me at this point. But we do have some ideas from previous metering that we still haven't got to. So if this metering shows that we fixed every problem, associated with those meters, we still have other stuff that we can put on our 5-year plan that we haven't corrected from previous studies because they weren't really, the low-lying fruit that you want to go after. Because you can spend a lot of money trying to find II.
Mhm. Good. Does that answer the question, Ron?
So I would say we're about a month out, if that helps.
Yeah. So, yeah, just
Long story short. Yep. All right, let's move on to the status reports, beginning with Group 6, which is in charge of looking at who in town is responsible, who has authority, and how will they be accountable for changes that get enacted from this work. Tom, are you here?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share our findings of Group 6 on the Water Resources Protection Task Force. As Steve already mentioned, we're responsible for the town responsibilities, authorities, and accountability. Many of our answers focus on the tasks that are needed to be completed by the town government departments, elected and appointed boards and committees. This report also focuses on what's happening now and mentions some actions that can be taken based on the work and efforts of this task force. First of all, we were asked to check on what is the town, how was the town acting to manage water demand? Well, water demand is managed through a tiered water use system. It has 6 tiers on it. The lowest rate of the tiers is $8.36 per 100 cubic feet for the first 900 cubic feet of water used. The highest rate is for the highest water users, and that's at $8.96 per 100 cubic feet of water over 39,000 cubic feet of water used. These 6 categories are based on the amount of water used. They're reviewed annually, and recommendations from the DPW to the Board of Selectmen establish the rate for each fiscal year. Those water bills do go out quarterly, and those of you who get them just probably love opening them. And you find out that actually we're talking about 2 different rates. The water rate is by far smaller than the sewer rate, and that of course is because of the system to pay for water versus the system to pay for the sewer in terms of having each of those departments separately taken care of. We also looked a little bit into conservation and the use of gray water. I think many of us look and still see that, Boston and areas in the eastern third of our state are in pretty bad shape right now. And then the drought monitor, wherein the drought monitor has us in a moderate drought category. Our water usage is, our water total in Boston in terms of precipitation is close to 5 inches below normal at the halfway point of the year. In fact, tomorrow, the new drought manager website will come out and it will tell us exactly what it is. And it just happens to be the end of June, so we'll know exactly where we are halfway through the year. Many of the communities around us, and some of you know that if you have friends in some of these communities, they seem to be on water restrictions many months of the year. And in fact, you go into the town and you see all kinds of signs saying, we're at level 2, we're at level 3, you need to be limiting irrigation. You need to only be doing hand watering. Hand watering is only can be done on odd numbered days of the week if you live in an odd number, or if you live in an even numbered house on even numbered days of the week, even days of the month, excuse me. The conservation practices really have to have acceptance by the users as well as enforcement. The town in the last about 5 years has put 2 conservation restrictions in terms of water. One in 2020 when the Lincoln Street well went down, but the last one that was for droughts was in 2016 when the last big drought impact in Manchester occurred. The Board of Selectmen instituted watering restrictions. Many of the large volume users refused to buy into that, and there was no real strong enforcement. I know as the chair of the board at that time, we received quite a few letters basically saying, as long as I can pay for the water, I'm going to use it, which was a little bit irritating. We thought it was probably, maybe they'd at least cut back on some of their irrigation, but that did not happen. And as Chuck has already informed us in the questions that were submitted to him, needless to say, historically, the largest volumes are pumped during the summer due to the large number of irrigation systems around town. Is there a possibility of using gray water for irrigation? Is it possible that some people who have large irrigation systems could get the gray water from their house and collect it and be used in irrigation systems? That would be something that would need to be investigated, and whether it would be the homeowner responsibility or the homeowner and the town working together for that, because it certainly would benefit the entire town if we could get gray water to be used for irrigation. There are many organizations, many departments, many boards, many committees that are responsible to manage water in town. The DPW manages all aspects of the town infrastructure and the property related to water distribution. They're also in charge of the collection of wastewater, but that's not part of this discussion. But in the nuts and bolts of who's responsible, the DPW is primary. I have 2 comments I'd like to make about that. One, that, when you listen to our DPW director, Chuck, and Nate talk about water issues, you know that they're both talented and have the skills that are necessary. And I believe we're lucky to have them not only as members of this committee, but also in terms of making sure to regulate our water issues with us. And secondly, I will say that after many years of not putting enough money into the capital budget to fund capital improvements in the water system, for the last 8 to 10 years, we've seen major improvements in this category in capital budgeting. The elected board, the select board, which is difficult for me to say, rather than Board of Selectmen after quite a few years there. That group, as already has been mentioned tonight, are the water and sewer commissioners. They set their yearly rates for water and sewer, as previously mentioned. The board can issue and institute conservation restrictions based on drought conditions or problems in the distribution system. And the board is also responsible for negotiating an agreement with the Essex County Club for an easement in the town-owned land, which is part of the 6th and 7th hole of the Essex County Club. The appointed board of the Board of Health there have the ultimate responsibility to assure safe drinking water gets delivered to residences and locations where food and drink are served. On the sewer side, they of course also administer Title V to prevent contamination of drinking water supplies from septic systems that are not functioning properly. And the Board of Health, we also here during the summer, also monitors the water quality at beaches and public bathing areas to assure that they're safe from contamination for swimming. The Board of Health can also recommend adopting local water supply regulations to protect the future and present water supply sites. The Manchester Essex Conservation Trust has proposed regulations to preserve drinking water in the context of public health. The proposal is presently being reviewed, and it may come before the Board of Health for discussion soon. The Planning Board, an elected board, and the ZBA, an appointed board. First of all, the Planning Board receives yearly reports from the Essex County Club on the actions taken by the club on the town-owned land near the Lincoln Street well and covered by the easement. This includes the amount of treatment and fertilizer that they use or do not use on that property. They can also work to develop new water protection overlay districts and or bylaws to protect present and or future water supplies. The zoning bylaws section 10.3 is the overlay district for ground and surface water protection. With the research that's being done by different groups in this task force and also being done by Scott Horsley, there's certainly a potential that we may need to expand this district as we learn more about the town's water sources. What are neighboring towns doing? Well, I mean, the primary place where we can get this information might start with Senator Tarr's North Shore Water Resiliency Task Force. Chuck Dam and others from Manchester are representing our town. There's no doubt that this task force will report major differences between the cities and towns that are in the Ipswich River watershed and those that are not. As you know, Manchester by the Sea is not in the Ipswich River watershed and is not dependent upon that as a source. The neighboring cities and towns have varied water supplies, including groundwater supplies and or wells. Currently, our water supply, from looking at the pumping values, pumping amounts, excuse me, is adequate for the existing residential and business customers. I think we need to be very careful in terms of using or dedicating a large amount of water to one build out or one 40B project like Shingle Hill that could use a large portion of our excess capacity and possibly put us into more frequent water conservation emergencies. Also, as Chuck just talked about, here in town, we've had the adequate funding of water infrastructure for I&I detection and remediation, relining or replacing water supply pipes, and work to improve our water supply facilities. This is something that I believe it should become one of the functions of the task force to make sure that this information gets out to the people. And when information is presented to the annual town meeting or a special town meeting concerning water, this would be something that someone on our task force could speak to make sure that people really understand the importance of this. As a side note, the town of Hamilton has received a grant to investigate regionalization of water supplies with their neighboring towns, as well as the Salem Beverly Water Board. Nationally, we realize that there are certain things that can be done nationally or right locally, right where we are. First of all, is to protect the watershed area. Purchasing land in the watershed area or getting a conservation restriction on the land can make a major difference to protect the land as well as water supplies in that area. The big issue that comes up is by the time anyone finds out that this land is available, someone else is already trying to get a hold of it. Now, hopefully it's the Manchester Essex Conservation Trust. Purchasing the land becomes much more difficult when the property becomes available, because the town can't spend money that it does not have approved for this purchase. The expense has to be approved by the annual or special town meeting. And also the town is not able to spend above the assessed value of the land that is offered. Managing demand can occur by thinking about different ways to have water rates. And one way is the conservation rates. Conservation rates, I have spent some time on the American Water Works Association website. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but basically it's stimulating water use efficiency and water conservation through economic incentives. So this would be, basically through water price signals. In other words, continuing possibly to raise the rates for larger users. And long-term planning is something, again, I believe that the town has made major goals on this in the last few years. Manchester by the Sea has a long-range budget that looks at infrastructure expenses in a 5-year and 10-year model, making sure the proper planning and then adequate financing occurs at the annual town meeting is important. One other thing is that is something that could come up in a flyer if we were going to send one out with a water bill or tax bills. And the town also has received a CREAT grant, which is a climate resiliency evaluation assessment tool from the EPA. And I know that Chuck, Nate, Sue Croft, and Peter Colarusso are working on this for the town. So that's what Group 6 has at the present moment.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Peter and Ashley and I have a few updates in terms of those possible regulations from Board of Health. But before we give those, let's hear any questions for Tom's excellent overview and anticipation of issues. Go ahead, Jessica.
I would always like to argue that we do conservation efforts earlier. I mean, I know being a gardener and being 5 inches down for the year already, and we don't know what kind of summer is coming. And I feel like Manchester, when they have done conservation efforts, has waited, too long. And my idea, I think there's simple things, just no sprinklers between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., for example, that could be done. That wouldn't be even telling people they can't water, but would make it more efficient. And then my other just personal pet peeve is the foot washer up at the beach that just sends all that water into the parking lot. And I would be all for banning that. But that's just my personal pet peeve.
Very well put. Gordon?
Right. Thanks. I was just wondering, you made some nice points about sort of the stress on the system already and the impact that a large development could have. Is this something that this board should share with the ZBA in an official capacity to talk about that? Or is it something that any members have already shared personally directly with the board?
I think I would turn that question over to Chuck and see if that information has gone to the ZBA or it's been requested by anybody.
So it has been talked about. I know it was definitely talked about on the lip. I don't know. I've had to be at one meeting for the current incarnation, but I guess where this gets difficult is I tend to agree that, we don't want to, give the water away to any one particular development or, so on and so forth. But I think that maybe that's how my opinion was formed when we were going through the LIP process. But in the current incarnation, I really don't think it matters because we are under our registered amount, and the numbers that they've given for what they anticipate their usage to be based on, pretty standardized, calculations. It's not significant to where we are with regards to our permit. And so, and it's almost to the point where it's not like, even if they're wrong or I'm wrong, or we do build out a lot more area under, for some other build out, not related to this. There's really, we're just not there yet, we're not at a point where, and the other thing that's very hard, and as you guys know, is our unaccounted for water currently is at 25%, and 25% is not where the state wants us to be. They want us to be at 10%. So if you were to make the argument that we can't allow anybody to connect, this is, regardless of any, current foreseen development, but just in our future general practice, we really need to get that 15% of unaccounted for back, and or be able to identify what's going on there. And that's another thing. We talked about the INI and the consent order. That's another thing that we are working very hard on is, and so like that 15% in and of itself represents a much larger number than any one person or one potential development or existing development is in their usage. So you see what I'm saying? It's very hard to make the argument that I agree with it, but it's not the argument that we can make in terms of existing developments.
And where do we stand on the sewer limits now? You said it was 80% at one point, but we've improved that.
Yeah, so we're drastically under that as well. So I mean, to be perfectly blunt, we don't have any capacity issues within our existing collection system or distribution system, and that's really not the argument that we can make.
Okay.
Well,
From my point of view.
So Chuck, is that amount on the 40B project between 25 and 30,000 gallons per day?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the quick update on these proposed new regulations for the Board of Health is that, as Tom said, MECT initiated them with some help from their counsel, Dan Hill and his associates. Gave them to Board of Health last fall. Board of Health looked at them and was favorable, I think, but also realized the task force was just spooling up and wanted us to have a chance to look at them and maybe contribute. So we've taken that pretty seriously over the last couple of weeks, and a small group of us, informal subcommittee of Ashley, Peter, and myself, with advice from Scott Horsley, have been rewriting these regulations with the input of comparables from towns somewhat similar to us, like Hingham or Sherburne or Millis, which have varieties of new regulations in the Board of Health that are similar or overlapping. So we've gone to school somewhat and produced something that's a little north of 20 pages with proper definitions and scientific backup and references to government standards. And I'm sure it's not perfect, but as Sue Brown said to the planning board just a few nights ago, you folks have the ability, in this case, Board of Health, to vote these in and then to correct them, add to them, change them. It's your hunt. So don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I've been struggling for some way to make this accessible. It's 20 dense pages of definitions and regulations and processes. and performance standards and burdens of proof. And I just want to try out on you a one-page overview, which I'll be happy to send along, although the idea here is to make it simple enough so that it's more or less self-explanatory. And teammates, Ashley and Peter, please weigh in with things I've got wrong here. Essentially, I'm answering the question, what's covered by these new regulations? What's protected? How is that protection done, and how is it going to be enforced? So what's covered is the impact on current and potential drinking water sources from two primary things. One is any building of a significant development. Second is building or operating what's called a small wastewater treatment plant, but that's small in comparison to the municipal scale. So the details are that the significant development would have on-site septic designed above 2,000 gallons per day, or earthwork, meaning disturbance and removal, drilling, shoveling, blasting above 350 cubic yards, or new impervious surface above 2,000 square feet. This could be a single family residence if it was substantial. It could be a commercial development. It could be a multifamily or multi-lot project. The second is the wastewater treatment plant that would normally be reviewed only by DEP under state law. This is a design level above 10,000 gallons per day that is exempt from Title V. So the town presently has no input on these. And so this is designed both to capture significant developments that might have impact on drinking water sources and large wastewater treatment, large in the sense of something serving a big residential development or, well, something similar. What's protected are what's defined as protected water bodies, which is meant right now to be kind of everything, all actual and potential sources of potable water, which include surface and groundwater, aquifers, and then specific named streams. In it right now is Sawmill, Cat, Causeway, Gravelly Pond, and Round Pond. And the protection is applied when there's any activity proposed within 400 feet or 200 days groundwater travel time, or the activity is within the existing ground and surface water resource overlay protection district. Did I get that right? Yeah, unpronounceable. What happens is, the key of it, I think, is this thing called an environmental health permit. So you have to file an environmental health impact report with some pretty specific standards for hydrogeological study, quantitative standards for impact, performance standards, in other words, specifics about bedrock disruption, drainage of stormwater. All of this is consistent with existing Title V performance standards, but essentially would give the Board of Health an opportunity to protect this aspect of public health. Three other things: the requirement of a removal and restoration plan for substantial earthwork, a construction permit and a certificate of compliance before you start operating, a small wastewater treatment plant, and an operations permit that has to be renewed annually. Now, these plants are large enough so that they should require some professional supervision. May not be full-time, but holding them to these standards as the state would. The enforcements are proposed to be fines for violation of $300 a day for the first 5 or 7 days. I think that may be wrong. And $500 a day thereafter. Also, the capability for the Board of Health to issue stop work orders for unpermitted or violating work. And if that stop work order is not followed, more substantial fines, $1,000 a day while the violation continues. Did I miss anything critical, Ashley, Peter?
No, I think you've summarized it. I do believe, though, the final version was 33 pages, which is north of 20. That's true.
Yeah, my version has really small type. So, yeah.
Looks good.
Okay, this would be a significant step forward in terms of home rule in a number of ways. And I think the plan, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong here, the Board of Health plans to announce and try to hold a public hearing in late July on this. And then to vote on whether or not to make this part of their regulations.
That is correct. I mean, I don't mean to cry on anyone's shoulder here, but we are absolutely bombarded with work in the summertime. We have more stuff to do than we have days to do it. People are changing their vacations so that we can keep quorums. So we've tentatively, to plan this out, we've tentatively set a public hearing for the end of July. I believe it's the 28th. Not only would we like to, clean all of our to-do list, but we are also trying to write a job description for a health agent. And if this plan is adopted, this policy is adopted, in my opinion, it would significantly alter the qualifications that we're looking for. So it's important for the long-term oversight and management of the health department that we get a feel for whether this is something that everyone's comfortable with and is an effective way to protect our water or not. And I want to thank everyone who has contributed, because there's no doubt in my mind that my fellow board members are very talented. They're highly educated. There is absolutely no way that we could have created a document anywhere near as good as this document is. So kudos to this committee, to the people that have contributed and their suggestions. And you've done a great job, service to the town.
Thank you. Right back at you. And this is not to forestall or prevent anybody from looking through the full proposed regulation. Happy to send it around, although we'll probably keep it to ourselves for now until the Board of Health has a chance to review and put it through a public hearing. Anne, please unmute.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you may have frozen. Ashley, would you like to speak up while we wait for Anne's connection to restore?
Yeah, quick question. Is there some way that we can, as a committee, even though our opinion isn't necessary for the Board of Health, is there a way that we could somehow indicate our opinion and circulate the document so that we could sort of, I don't know, politically give it a nod or whatever would be helpful? Is there some mechanism we could do?
There's certainly a possibility. I had thought it's a little bit too much legwork for each person to try to familiarize herself or himself with this and put it to a formal vote. But if people disagree, I'm happy to do that.
I'd like to have it.
Pronto, it'll be in your email box.
What I was trying to say is the Affordable Housing Trust is planning some major renovations that do affect areas that are in the water protection zones. And I would like to understand the implication of these regulations on that work, which I think is strongly in the interest of the town.
Very good point. Thanks for looking ahead up to that. John?
Yeah, Steve, and kudos to you and Peter and Ashley for pulling that, pulling all of this together and to kind of get an overview of 33 pages onto one page in terms of the, I'm not even going to call it the 20,000 foot view, but at least be able to summarize and organize in your mind how things are fitting together, I think is pretty critical. One question I have is, we've got these cutoffs, I don't know what it was, 350 cubic yards of earth and
Yep.
I don't know, 2,000 square feet of impervious or 20,000 square feet of impervious surface or something. have you looked, or has anyone looked at, say, the past 5 years and what building permits would have been taken out that would have been affected by this? And so where I'm going with this is I'm saying, you've got this put together. Does it make a difference at these cutoffs for what's going on in town?
You know, I can't speak to septic because we don't, Concom doesn't get these kind of statistics.
Right.
But we do closely monitor incremental impervious surfaces in wetlands jurisdiction. Now, wetlands jurisdiction is much narrower and tighter, fewer square miles by far than drinking water protection and overlay districts. But I would guess we have seen a dozen, just a wild, educated wild guess, a year. Projects mainly new construction that are going to involve driveways and roof surfaces and other things that have impervious above 2,000, not all of it in wetlands jurisdiction.
Okay, that's
Peter,
that's-
can you make any guess about Title V applications that have been above 2,000 gallons per day?
No, but I would tell you, just as to Ann's point and to John's, as long as I've been on the board, we have never prevented a project. What we have required is systems to minimize impact. And they may very well be more expensive than the planner had wanted, but we do, particularly on some of these unique job sites, are pretty firm that you need to use, well, a Presby system, for instance, and you need to report every year the condition of that system in order to get the permit. So we're not preventing them from doing anything. We're just ensuring that they use the best technology available to minimize the impact.
Mhm. That's a good way to put it. Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback kind of on what Ann was saying with the affordable housing, but also in our current, or what will be current on Friday, the FY23 budget, we will be looking at doing a facilities master plan. And as probably a lot of people know, if certain things go in certain ways, there's chances that we would do, the existing DPW facility would become housing. There's a chance that a new DPW, or especially if the old one is taken for some other housing initiative, that we'll need to build a new DPW. And then right behind that is the potential of a COA, Council on Aging, or shared public services building. So these are kind of the big ticket, larger footprint items that I would very much want to know that has been accounted for within this sort of effort, because it's unclear right now, especially where those would be built.
Yep. And those are more likely to be subject to this new regulation since they're incremental construction. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that renovations are unlikely to trigger these things.
Well, I mean, the proposals are meant to address situations where we know are identified drinking water. So sources of drinking water.
Right.
I don't know how close the DPW is to the creek. It may be within the 400 feet, but I don't think so. Is it, Chuck?
Well, the existing DPW is certainly within the groundwater protection district, which a lot of town is. And so I guess that's one of my comments from last time. I wasn't able to make the meeting, but really, I feel like if this is protecting the groundwater, which I think it is intended to, it really should be kind of coordinated with that, or supersede it, and so we're able to remove the other one if it's covering everything. And that's where I think the aquifer, north of 128, is so far, I think, out of the groundwater protection zone. I'm all for adding it if it's warranted, but I don't want to have to do the same report twice, or answer to several different boards for something that could be answered by one. So that's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, well, the locations of those groundwater has nothing to do with the Board of Health. So.
Yeah, but
you-
you're essentially co-opting all of potential water or, all potential water. So therefore it is now would be under Board of Health, and therefore that should be addressed.
Well, it has to, I believe the overlay protection has to be expanded or extended, right?
Essentially, I think that's what you're doing, but you're
No,
not
I'm
doing it.
We're not extending the overlay. That's not our jurisdiction.
I know, but for all intents and purposes, you are, because to put it another way, if you were to build something like Ann was saying on the existing affordable housing properties, those are within the groundwater protection district, but now they would also be subject to this new Board of Health regulation. And so the point being that you shouldn't really have to do two if they're trying to accomplish the same thing, which they are. And so whether it's DPW or public safety or affordable housing, those are big ticket items that, we should really consider that. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, we work hand in hand with Concom all the time. And it's almost like double dipping. They have to get approval from Concom before we'll even consider Title V situations now. So there's an overlap, it doesn't hurt. And again, it's not meant to prevent anything. It's just a way to ensure that the latest technology to protect the water is used. And that is maybe an expense item. I'm not a design engineer, so I have no idea.
I'm less concerned about the construction costs, which are certainly a cost, but those can be considered within the project. But I believe the last iteration of this showed that you need to have some sort of report done, by very highly qualified engineers and scientists. So it's just to say, like, the more you pay consultants before you even get to construction is a very real cost as well. So I that's all I'm saying is that these things need to be looked at, and that's what I'm asking.
And I take your point strongly that duplicating requirements, overlaying a more strict requirement for the same purpose is not a great idea. It's going to produce inconsistent results and a lot of confusion. So that's something we should take under advisement and go back and look at. Thank you for that. Can I move us forward to a brief update from Team One? And I'll do that with a train in the background. For those of you who are listening, you can hear that. Team One so far has been Jeff Koshan and myself, and it's a good thing we're both nerds for Excel, because Sue Taylor has provided one of the nicest databases I've ever received from a client in years of asking, General Electric and Eli Lilly and reputable companies to produce good databases of customers. We have 10 years of residential, municipal, commercial, industrial, governmental usage by account, by quarter, by meter, actually, when accounts have multiple meters. So we have an embarrassment of good data. And I stress this point because I've been in touch now with several other towns that are grappling with the question of making a shift from a cost-based rate plan, which is clearly what we are using and most other towns use, to one that factors in conservation much more heavily. And many of them don't have these data. They have a billing system that doesn't generate this kind of stuff. So for example, they can't do something as straightforward as this. This is a number of years. I think it's 12, 16, and 21 combined and merged. So this is percent of accounts ranked from the smallest user to the biggest user. And the blue is how much water they used in a year. You can see it's a highly skewed distribution, as we all expect. The red line is the cumulative usage, which suggests something, I mean, a cumulative usage that was a straight diagonal line would be kind of even usage by everybody, and this is considerably skewed. The specific here is that half the water is used by the top 16% of accounts, and also by the bottom 84% of accounts. And the top 20 accounts are using 12% of the water. By looking at wintertime usage, it's pretty clear that you can't run up your usage by flushing your toilet a whole lot more, or taking a lot more showers, or steaming a lot more vegetables, or other things you might do in the wintertime. People tend to use, within limits, roughly the same amount of water for household uses. So it's based on how many people are there, how many guests they have, that kind of thing. It's summer where there's a huge difference between many houses, many residences that use a little more, and a smaller, maybe the 200, we have about 2,000 accounts, or 2,000 meters, I should say. I think it's accounts in this. And the top 10% are using more than 40% of the water, and that's largely because of summer usage outdoors. We've also probed into the rate nature of this, and found that there's a difference between the people who are on the sewer system and the people who are relying on their own septic, largely because of location. The people on their own septic use a lot more water than the people who are on the sewage system. And even among those on the sewage system, municipal sewage, about 300 people, 300 or 400 people have what are called deduct meters, which enables them to use water outdoors without having to pay the sewer charge. And those people use the highest average amount of water per year. So all of this is kind of predictable, but it leads to the first area we're looking at, Jeff and I, and we'll be coming back to you with more information about, which is, should we follow the lead of many other towns in Massachusetts and put the need for conservation in before it's urgently required, and do that in terms of the rate structure. So for instance, a number of towns on the Cape and Plymouth have gone to a progressive structure that has much higher rates for heavy use. Our difference is less than 10% for medium light use versus heaviest use. Some are debating in putting rate structures that are different by season, just to emphasize the fact that summer is the time to be more attentive to conservation and to provide some of those incentives. Many of them have done away with what we call deduct meters, which they had, for some reason, many of them call green meters, I guess because they turn your lawn green. But they are obviously kind of going completely in the opposite direction from conservation. Because as Tom said, you may spend the $8.80 or 90 cents per 100 cubic feet for the water, but you don't pay the $14.50 per 100 cubic feet for the sewer treatment. So seasonal progressive rates are kind of under consideration. Changing our approach to deduct meters is under consideration. And we're also examining the question of what kind of positive incentives we could give people other than higher prices. Positive incentives would include help of one kind or another, creating very beautiful landscapes that don't require a lot of water. These things exist, we're just not using them very widely. We're also, I guess finally, we're looking at the question of, would it be better to try to get the 1,800 smaller users in the system to save, say, 10% of their water, and say put bricks in their toilets and that sort of thing? Or would it be better to rely on the top 200 accounts for conservation. And I think you probably, intuitively, you probably know the answer to that question, but we want to make it clear that this isn't a, sorry for the bad pun, soak the rich kind of approach. This is going to be based on where the evidence leads us if we're serious about conservation. Any questions about Jeff and my work? Jessica, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question about the deduct meters. I mean, we put one in years ago and I don't think it makes us use necessarily more water. And is there any argument for the fact that that water is actually going into the ground and not just into the sewer and then out to the harbor, and it's actually permeating back into the groundwater if we're using it for outdoor watering? I never thought of it as something that makes me use more water. I just, when we did it initially, thought, okay, it's water that's not going into the sewer system, so why should we be paying that rate? But yeah, is there anything good about it that it's water that's going back into the groundwater?
I guess the simplest answer is, if I follow your argument to a logical conclusion, we should simply pump a lot of water into the ground. And that doesn't make any sense. We're talking about conservation, and the question is, do you need to use purified drinking water on your lawn, your gardens, your car, your swimming pool? And I'm pretty convinced that you do not. It's difficult to maintain perennial ryegrass and most of our garden beds, and we can't this kind of thing isn't going to happen in a year, may not happen in 10 years, but we're supposed to take a 50-year outlook, and I think,
Yeah, if there was a way I could use gray water, I would much more happily do that.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. So we got to help with that. And
did you look for anomalies? One of the things that happens from time to time is somebody has a break, and their water bill suddenly goes from mid-hundreds to high thousands.
Yeah.
In your data analysis, did you consider that sort of an anomaly? Because the way to find that is, are the people who are at the top level consistently at the top level, or
That's
is the top
exactly
level only consist of people who have had a catastrophic failure?
no, there were a couple of things that stuck out like sore thumbs, and thanks to Sue Taylor, I could confirm that they were in fact breaks. And I think some of them were so large that they had to have come before the select board for some kind of abatement. So that led us to do exactly what you said, which is to look at people's usage. Again, it's just 2012, 2016, 2021 in this data set, but we figured it would be extremely bad luck to have a leak that triggered mammoth losses those 3 years. And almost everybody in the top 200 stays in the top 200. So it's there, but I think it's more, it's painful to any individual, but more anecdotal.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Nate, speak up.
Yeah, to kind of go along with Jessica's point about, using it for water for gardens, has the town done a rain barrel program or promoted that? It's obviously a small incremental step, but the more people you can get using rain barrels, and I'm pretty sure the state does some rain barrel programs. That's could be a small step that we could take.
Yeah, it's a really good idea. And I love the idea that we could start small, basically by piggybacking on stuff that's already going on.
Yep.
And you look at towns that have more severe issues, not simply in terms of drought conditions, but saltwater infiltration of their wells and rapid growth, development and addition to their population. Plymouth comes to mind, because suffering from all of those things. They're basically going to blaze a trail for us. Ashley.
I know recently Essex had rain barrels come through. I got rain barrels through a program in Essex. Maybe we could see if it's something we could replicate here.
Good idea.
I did look into it. We missed the cutoff last year, and I unfortunately never got back to it again this year. But I actually have the contact. I don't think it's from Essex, it's from Wenham, but they might be the same people for all I know. But it's definitely pretty easy to pull off with either any of these vendors. It's just a matter of, does the town subsidize it, or does the homeowner pay for it?
Chuck, you're reminding me, one of the issues lurking underneath this is that the system actually benefits in revenue terms substantially from the use of water in the summer because people pay for it.
Yeah.
So one of the questions is, suppose we were to go to some phase into some kind of dramatic change where the heaviest users would be paying 10 times as much per cubic foot as the light users. Wouldn't we sort of cripple the revenue flow and put Chuck in an embarrassing situation where, we basically can't pay for the operating cost of the system? There's evidence from a number of these other towns that says that doesn't happen in practice. That demand is what economists call inelastic for this particular commodity. So,
well, I would be interested to know if those towns have the type of increasing block rate structure that we do, and just understand that. But so that is, kind of my number one thing whenever, not only in this group, but, I hear it a lot in other venues that I participate in. And, there's a real revenue. And the problem is that no matter what you do, we have fixed costs in the budget every year to, pay for the, electricity, to pay for the, maintenance, to pay for the salaries, to pay for all of these things. And so that is a fixed nut. It doesn't go up or down based on how many gallons we, send out into the system and how many bills we collect. So there is, and this was looked at when I think they implemented, it was before my time, but not that much before my time, where I think Eli, did a similar analysis to what you guys have done here, and, tried to make a educated guess on what was that inelasticity or elasticity of demand. And that's how we got to the point where we had a highest block where we have it. And the idea that we should continue to turn that dial until we see the corresponding decrease in demand at that higher rate. In the past few years, at least since I've been here, we've only done a percentage across all rates, not against just the higher rates, but that is, also on the table. And so I think that, if you guys had more time and, wanted to undertake that aspect of this analysis, I think that's kind of what the next question I would have.
It's a good question. And I'm going to be much more thorough in looking at these case studies of towns that have made the progressive rates, the block rates, considerably different. I mean, we're talking a couple of orders of magnitude from where they started, which was very small differences, because it doesn't cost a whole lot more to furnish somebody with 10 or 100,000 cubic feet than it does to furnish them with 1,000.
Yeah, another way to look at it is those higher rates, those high, that top 16% of users or accounts, they're subsidizing that lower block for the 84%. And so there is a give and a take there for sure.
Right, but the current difference is less than 10% in price. So the amount of subsidy isn't not that huge. It's really their usage that drives the fills the coffers. So that's the thing we need to be aware of and worry a little bit about, because you'd hate to kill the goose there.
Be interesting to see where that break-even point is of, could they start to subsidize the unaccounted for water reduction, getting, the infrastructure improvements,
Well, and there's another break even, which would be, I think, a PhD candidate could write about for the thesis, which is the alternatives for the user, which is, sinking your own well,
Right.
Radically changing your expensive landscape. Not something anybody would want to do, but at some point, make economic sense. Okay, I'm now talking about things I haven't figured out yet, so I'm going to stop. But thanks to Jeff for doing that, and also apropos the other quick update status report. Jeff has agreed to help me with outreach, and I would welcome one or two other people volunteering to do this. All this means is lending a hand with communication to the media, to Facebook, to public service announcements, anything else we can think of. Even old school approaches like putting up a flyer here and there, as well as helping get people to pay attention to and participate in the survey, which we hope still to launch. So thanks, Jeff. Which brings us to scheduling our next meeting on July 13. I'm sure there'll be some more vacationing going on, but I think it's probably important to try. Yes, Anne.
I think July 13 is a ZBA 40B, which covers some very interesting topics this time.
Yes,
The-
I think they're
And
gonna
I
see
think,
some of us,
conflicting with that is
not a good idea.
problematic.
Okay. Yeah, so they set that schedule up on a different cycle. There we go. How about July 20? Anybody quickly look at the website and of course, I'm not sure everything would be posted on the website that far ahead. Apologies to the. Yes, July 20 has the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, but no ZBA. Shall we give that a shot?
Sure.
Okay. Going once, going twice, sold for 7 p.m. on July 20. Meantime, Sue and I and a few other people will attempt to update the select board next week. And I don't think we'll be by any means the most important item on their agenda. But we're
Steve, just
hoping-
as a reminder, I'm not going to be here next week.
Right. So you can just prepare all the materials.
Okay, I can do that.
Thank you. So I'm planning that we would simply touch on all 6 of the sub teams or groups, and with a particular attention to where this might go. We don't want to speculate wildly or alarm anybody, but we need to, pay attention to the fact that the Lincoln Street well may not be in compliance over the next decade or longer. And for that matter, we may have to spend monies to protect Gravely Pond as well. And particularly stuff that the select board might be able to lean into a little more when they have time and energy, like regionalization or at least neighboring cooperation with neighboring towns. It baffles me that Hamilton is acting kind of miffed, to put it mildly, that we failed to approve their realignment of Chabaco Road, and so they'll pave it wherever they want. What we should really be talking about is, can we come up with a collective solution to water supply and watershed protection? So that'd be helpful. Anybody who has suggestions about that briefing, please let me know separately. And that brings us to minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes of July
15th.
Yes, that one. What she said.
June,
June 15th.
June.
Thank you.
be nice
After-
to have the July minutes.
Yes. Subscription to tomorrow's Wall Street Journal is what everybody wants. All right, hearing none. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So
Okay, well, thank you. And moves, and a second
Second.
from Jessica. All those in favor indicate by a sound or a sign. Which is good. Anyone opposed? Same thing, sound or sign. I have no doubt they're approved. All right, any other items?
Steve, I just have a quick question. So am I gonna send out, I don't have the new Board of Health regulations yet that you guys are working on, but are we gonna circulate those and are we planning to vote on them? I don't feel like we finally answered that question. Because I will
didn't
have to
hear-
put, if we're gonna planning to vote on it, I need to have it in an agenda. And I don't know if it's the next agenda or which agenda it is.
Yeah, unless I hear a groundswell of, more than 3 people on the task force who want to really dig into this stuff and vote on it, I'm going to presume that we'll do it as an advisory, something that we have put a subcommittee on and looked at and briefed ourselves on, and we leave it in the good judgment of the Board of Health. So please speak up separately. Let me know by email or phone.
I want to see it.
Ann wants to see it. Chuck has said yes too, and I think is that Sue Brown, Manchester by the Sea3?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, good. Be happy to do that. It still needs to have some typos and formattos and other things fixed, but that should be done in the next few hours. And Gordon, yeah, just let me know. Ron, what's up?
Just through you to Chuck, the work that's going on C Street, School Street, is that a capacity increase, the water main, or a leaks, or what is kind of going on there?
So Chuck had to jump off, but it's all of the above. It is in the existing 120, 30-year-old water main that is, severely tuberculated. So the crux of the project is to clean all the tuberculation out. So that's going to help with our water quality. It's going to be much better for flushing. School Street is one of the trunk, quote unquote trunk lines for the town. So, all the kind of branches, all the side streets come off of it. So it's going to help improve the water quality in terms of dirty water. And it's also going to improve fire flows, capacity, pressure, just by having, a pipe that has, accumulated a few inches of tuberculation. So a 12-inch pipe is now, say, 8 inches by cleaning all of that tuberculation, which is like the mineral deposits, off, and then spraying a cement liner on it. It's obviously makes it, essentially a new pipe back to the 12-inch capacity. So that's really the crux of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. I think we're ready to hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Harrison, and then without objection, this task force stands in recess. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you very
Dave.
much.
Happy
you.
4th.
Happy
Yeah.
4th.
See you on the parade.